What you desire desires you. This is a very commonly known law of the universe. However, in reality, this is not what people experience. People generally experience more of what they don't want rather than what they do. And this is specifically true regarding your twin or separate soul or other self, however you may want to refer to them as. You are going to experience a real deep down desire to reunite with them and experience what you once had. It'll almost feel like it's coming from your very core being, like your soul is looking to merge as one. However, in your reality, you are going to experience something quite different. The very opposite to unconditional love, which is constant suffering. However, again, you will notice over time that the desire and the suffering will dissipate somewhat, but the desire itself will remain constant, meaning you will, no matter what would have happened in your 3D situation or your reality situation, you will still be hoping for a reunion with your twin. However, in order for any desire to manifest, it has to have one key characteristic, and that is you have to have the ability to let it go. If you're unable to let the desire go, then this desire has been blocked by a desperation and a need which is coming from your ego. Your ego is using fear in order to keep control, because for every desire, you're going to have an equal and opposite and maybe multiple fears attached. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you how you can start to dissolve these fears in order to release the desire. And this is the very last step in the process. After you have transcended the mind by deleting a lot of the repetitive thoughts, by feeling, and then you start to detach from your ego by taking action. And then the last step is to dissolve the fears and release the desire. And after this, you will experience freedom. Freedom in particular from that smell of desperation that will follow you around ever since your relationship with the twin will have ended. And I think most people listening will understand exactly what I mean. Every time you would have interacted with the twin or spoken about them to family or friends, or you came in contact with any maybe neighbours or acquaintances, they will all be very well aware of the smell of desperation that you are reeking of. However, this will be very quickly replaced by a freshness of awareness and presence. And every time you come into contact with somebody, they will realize that there's something very different about you. So, hi, my name is Sean. I'm a transcendency coach. My goal is to help people who are stuck on the journey to transcend the mind and get to that place of freedom where they can focus on their ascension path. So, example of a manifestation, and I would ask anyone listening to look at your own lives to see where you would have manifested things, because everybody will have done it at some stage. When I was about very young, I always had an interest in going to Pays-Bas or the Netherlands or Holland for some reason, and I eventually went. It was about 2021, and I really loved the place. And I remember walking across a bridge, and I remember asking myself the question, I wonder what it would feel like if I lived here and cycled a bike to work each day. And I remember bringing up the feeling and then letting it go. And about 6 or 7 years later, I was doing this exact thing. Now, the reason why it took 6 or 7 years is because unconsciously I did not realize there was a lot of fears attached to the desire, such as where would I get a job, where would I live, I didn't know anymore, how would I get the money to go, how would you set up a bank account, how would you speak the language, and so on and so forth. And it was only when I got some life experiences by traveling and living in a different country that I realized people actually do this quite often, and it's very common for people to switch countries. So I naturally dissolved the fears, and when I returned home from my travels, I went to speak at a recruitment agency who actually asked me would I be interested in a job in the Netherlands, and of course I was. I went, I did not get the job, but they recommended me for another job, which I did get. So this is an example of what I desired to go to the Netherlands. Also, the Netherlands desired me to come. And this will be the case for your twin. Over the years, you are going to naturally dissolve the fears. However, the problem you're going to face is that during these years or this long period, you're going to experience a huge amount of suffering and longing and desperation for them, which makes life quite difficult. So you're actually actively forced to start to dissolve the fears. And I'm going to use an example here that every single person on the journey will experience and will have this fear. And that is the fear that the twin is not going to come back and you're going to end up alone. Meaning that you're not going to be able to find somebody else. And for people who are already in relationships or prior to meeting the twin, you will realize pretty quickly, or you're on the way to, that these are going to dissolve and are going to end. And you are looking at a future of being potentially alone. So the first step on the process to dissolve the fears is this. You have to actually validate the fears. It might sound counterintuitive, but the ego hates this. So if you take this present moment, for anyone listening, in this present moment, the fear that you're going to end up alone is actually correct. This would appear in the present moment now that you most likely have no sign that the twin is coming back. You're unable to move on. You're unable to find somebody else, and your relationship that you're in is probably over. So actually, this fear that the ego has created is absolutely valid. It's a valid fear. And what you need to do is, when it comes up, sit with it, validate and say, yes, in this present moment, again, you're not manifesting a future event, you're sitting in this present moment, so yes, in this present moment, this fear is absolutely valid. It looks like this is going to be the case. And sit with it and see if any feelings come up to be transmuted or released. And then the second step is to start to dissolve them, to dissolve the fear. So regarding this fear, for example, we are coming to the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026. The majority of people across the world are going to create New Year's resolutions, things that they would like to change about themselves for the upcoming year, such as maybe lose some weight, stop smoking, stop drinking, change jobs, whatever it may be. But the majority of people will be unable to do so and will probably quit or give up on the New Year's resolution after a day or shortly after it, quite quickly. A very small number of people will actually be able to continue with the New Year's resolutions for a certain period of time, but eventually will go back to their old ways and old habits. And it'll be a very tiny fraction of people will actually be able to make a permanent change. Now, that is not because people are weak-willed or lack motivation or discipline. This is because their ego is too strong. The ego would have created these habits and formed them into your identity and will be unwilling to let go or control. So what is actually blocking people is the fact that it's their own ego is stopping them from making this positive change. However, this will not be the case for you, because as you have experienced ego death following the separation with your twin, you were forced into these changes. And you will realize from then to the present moment now, you will have dropped a large number of habits, beliefs and rituals that you probably previously tried to do prior to meeting the twin. And if this is not the case for you, then this is the actual number one sign if you're on this twin flame journey or not. If it's not the case, then you probably just made a mistake. But for anyone else listening, then this will mean you're exactly where you're meant to be. You are absolutely on this journey. And that means for you that by the end of 2026, you are going to be a very, very different version of yourself by the end of 2025. It's automatically happening for you. Your ego is naturally dissolving over time, and you are ascending each single day, meaning you are becoming more and more conscious. So you are constantly changing every single day. And by the end of 2026, again, you're going to be a very, very different version of yourself now. And eventually you're going to reach a place where you are very happy being by yourself, because all the beliefs and illusions will have gone. And what this will mean actually is that not only will you be happy being by yourself, you will realize that you've always been by yourself ever since you were born. And you will always will be by yourself is one of the realizations on the journey. And what this means for your twin is that you will no longer need them. You may still have the desire, but you will realize you will no longer need them or anyone else in that matter. And this is really the area where you're going to start to receive the abundance that you hear people talking about, such as new opportunities, new friends, and of course for most people out there, you're going to experience some sort of a reconnection with the twin. Now, this for me, everyone is generally going to have the final same experience with the twin, which I will share in an upcoming video called Yellowstone. And for people, the very small people the small number of people who won't, this is generally because they are really super spiritually advanced. But for everyone else, they're generally going to have the very same outcome with their twin. So this fear is actually not valid. It's not a valid fear. You are not going to be, you actually, in fact, I've always been alone. And it is not a valid fear that you're going to end up alone. And in the future, you are absolutely going to draw people in, whether it is your twin or maybe somebody else, but you are going to draw somebody in the future. So this is just a way, when the fears come up, is to just sit with them and start to dissolve them. And over time, they will start to release. Now, the problem with many people out there on the journey is you got to realize that you're going to have multiple fears, not just this one. For example, you probably have the fear, I'm not ready, I still need to lose some weight, for example. I can't afford it. I have fear of maybe having to face their spouse, or maybe their kids won't like me. They all seem to be quite common fears that everyone has since I've started coaching. But again, you just need to start to dissolve them because they're not actually correct. So one key point and a bit of a motivation for anyone out there listening that I experienced when I started to dissolve the fears, it seemed to have an automatic impact on the actual twin, because I started to notice that their demeanor actually became quite fearful. They seemed to have a very fearful fear about them. And when I started to lose my fears, it seemed to have a direct impact on them. And after this, I then noticed one day, which I can remember quite well, I remember thinking to myself, I think they're starting to chase me actually. And then by the end of the day, I was like, okay, yes, in fact, they are actually chasing me. And that's what I mean by this is really the last stage on the journey to get to that place of freedom. Because when you release the fears, the desire will go. And although you may want to, you might want to still reunite with them, you're absolutely not going to need it, and you're going to have some great experiences going forward. So again, these are the key 3 steps in the journey. You got to transcend the mind by feeling in order to release a lot of these repetitive thoughts. And then you got to take action to detach from the ego. And then you've got to dissolve the fears in order to release the desires. So in the upcoming videos, I'm going to share more about timelines and how they can actually be beneficial in setting a timeline in order to achieve this and really committing to it. And also how a kind of an opposite video to this is how by slowing down can actually really speed up the process. So I will create these 2 videos at the start of 2026. It could be a good time to share them. And I'm looking forward to speaking to more people as the journey continues. So thank everyone for listening, and thank you everyone for subscribing, and a happy new year, and I hope everyone had a very good Christmas. Thank you.